In the cold depths of space, where empires rise and fall like distant stars, the Vorthak hegemony, masters of 1,000 worlds, are about to discover that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their art, their culture, or their diplomacy. It was their unique talent for making the impossible seem routine, for turning defeat into the most dangerous kind of patience. They called it impossible to fly among the stars as equals. They were about to learn why humans never accepted the word impossible as an answer. The Dreadnought is waking up. The salvaged ship Carthek's Seeker drifted through the debris field like a scavenger through ancient bones. Captain Zekmor pressed his three-fingered hand against the viewport, his golden eyes scanning the twisted remains of what had once been humanity's proudest fleet. 300 years had passed since the Great Subjugation, yet the wreckage still held an ominous quality that made even veteran spacefarers nervous. Detecting minimal energy readings from Sector 7 Alpha, reported his sensor operator, a thin Kepler named Yixran. Probably just residual decay from old power cores. Zekmor's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement. The Vorthak hegemony had classified this region as a dead zone decades ago, suitable only for scavenging rare metals and studying primitive human technology. What remained of Earth's forces had been thoroughly cataloged, picked over, and deemed harmless. Still, something about this particular drift of debris felt different. "Take us closer," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 40 cycles salvaging the aftermath of the galaxy's conflicts. Those readings might indicate intact computer cores. The archive pays well for human data fragments. The Seeker maneuvered between the hulks of destroyed vessels, its sensors painting a detailed picture of the graveyard around them. Human ships were oddly designed compared to the elegant curves of Vorthak engineering or the crystalline structures favored by the Nexri Collective. They were angular, brutal things, built like the weapons they carried rather than the exploratory vessels of more civilized species. Yixran's tentacles fluttered over his console with growing confusion. "Captain, these readings are becoming more focused. It's almost as if something is drawing power from the surrounding debris." "Impossible," Zekmor replied automatically. "Human technology was centuries behind our own. Their power systems couldn't maintain coherence for more than a few decades without active maintenance." But even as he spoke, he could see something through the viewport that made his stomach clench with unease. Deep within the debris field, barely visible against the cosmic background, was a shape too regular to be natural destruction. It was massive, easily the size of a hegemony battlecruiser, but its configuration was unlike anything in their databases. "Run a full spectrum analysis," he commanded, his voice dropping to a whisper, "and send a priority message to Hegemony Command. Tell them we may have found something significant." The shape began to resolve itself as they drew closer. It was definitely artificial, but covered in 3 centuries of space debris and micrometeorite impacts. What Zekmor had initially taken for random wreckage was actually an elaborate camouflage system, designed to make the vessel blend perfectly with the surrounding destruction. "By the 7 moons," Yixran breathed, his voice filled with scientific excitement rather than fear. "Captain, this isn't just a ship. Look at these power conduits running through the debris. This entire section of the graveyard is connected. It's like the humans built some kind of massive distributed system using their destroyed fleet as components." Zekmor stared at the readings, his mind struggling to process the implications. Human technology was supposed to be crude, limited by their short lifespans and primitive understanding of quantum mechanics. Yet what he was seeing suggested a level of engineering sophistication that rivaled anything the hegemony had achieved. "How is this possible?" he muttered. "Our intelligence reports were clear. Humans never developed distributed consciousness technology. They barely understood basic AI principles." A new voice joined the conversation, speaking from the communication station with barely controlled excitement. "Captain, I'm receiving a response to our scanning attempts. It's in perfect galactic standard, but the source is definitely the large vessel." "Impossible," Zekmor repeated, but the word was beginning to lose its meaning. Humans don't use quantum-encrypted communications. Put on the main display. The message appeared as glowing text across their main screen, each word appearing with deliberate precision. Greetings, Salvage Vessel Karthek Seeker. Registration H7742. You are currently violating Terran territorial space as defined by the Proxima Accords of 2387. Please state your intentions and authorization codes. Asterisk. The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Finally, Yixran found his voice. Captain, the Proxima Accord were signed 3 years before the Great Subjugation. No human authority has existed to enforce them for centuries. Zekmor's golden eyes remained fixed on the display, his mind racing through possibilities. This had to be some kind of automated system, a dead man's switch left behind by humanity's final defenders. But the sophistication required to maintain such a system for 3 centuries while remaining completely undetected by hegemony surveillance was staggering. Transmit our salvage authorization from Hegemony Command, he ordered. If this is just an old automated system, our credentials should override any territorial claims. The response came immediately, appearing on their screen with the same measured precision. Salvage authorization noted and rejected. Hegemony Command lacks jurisdiction over Terran space under the terms of the Galactic Coexistence Treaty of 2301. You have 30 minutes to comply with territorial boundaries or defensive measures will be initiated. Asterisk. Defensive measures? Yixran's voice cracked slightly. Captain, what could a 3-century-old automated system possibly do to threaten us? Our shields alone are beyond anything humans ever developed. But Zekmor was studying his tactical display with growing unease. The energy readings from the large vessel were increasing exponentially, and his sensors were beginning to detect movement within the debris field. Pieces of wreckage that had appeared random and chaotic were shifting, aligning themselves with mathematical precision. Yixran analyzed the debris movement patterns. Tell me what you see. The sensor operator worked frantically over his console, his tentacles moving in complex patterns as he processed the incoming data. After several minutes, he looked up with an expression of pure terror. Captain, it's not random debris. Every piece of wreckage in a 50,000-kilometer radius is connected by microscopic filaments. The humans didn't just distribute their consciousness through their destroyed ships. They turned their entire graveyard into a single massive construction project. As if responding to their conversation, the space around them began to transform. What had appeared to be floating wreckage was actually components of an enormous structure, held in precisely calculated positions by nearly invisible connecting threads. The Seeker found itself suddenly surrounded by the skeletal framework of something beyond their understanding. Full power to engines, Zekmor commanded, his voice tight with controlled panic. Get us out of here immediately. But their engines produced only a low whine of protest. The ship's computer reported massive gravitational interference, as if space itself was being manipulated around them. Another message appeared on their display. Movement restriction protocols initiated. Salvage vessel Karthek Seeker is hereby detained for violation of territorial sovereignty. You will remain in position while proper authorities are contacted. Estimated arrival time: 14 hours, 37 minutes. Asterisk. What authorities? Yixran whispered. There are no human authorities left. We destroyed them all. The large vessel at the center of the debris field began to change. Centuries of accumulated space dust and debris fell away like a discarded skin, revealing a hull that seemed to drink in starlight rather than reflect it. The ship was enormous, easily twice the size of anything in the Hegemony fleet, but its design was utterly alien to known human engineering. Where human vessels were typically angular and brutal, this ship flowed like liquid metal frozen at the moment of impact. Its surface was covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched, geometric designs that suggested both incredible complexity and perfect mathematical harmony. Captain, the communications officer called out, his voice filled with wonder and fear, I'm detecting multiple quantum encrypted channels opening across the galaxy. This ship is talking to something, and the signals are being routed through relay stations I can't identify. Zekmore slumped in his command chair, the full magnitude of their discovery weighing down on him like the gravity of a neutron star. They hadn't found the remnants of humanity's defeated fleet. They had found something that humanity had been building while the galaxy thought them extinct. Send a priority emergency message to Hegemony Command, he ordered quietly. Tell them we need immediate fleet support. And tell them. He paused, staring at the impossible vessel that held them captive. Tell them that humanity isn't as dead as we thought. The ship around them hummed with increasing energy, and, through the viewport, they could see lights beginning to activate throughout the debris field. Not the harsh glare of emergency systems, but the soft, steady glow of a vast intelligence awakening after centuries of patient sleep. Deep within the vessel that held them, something stirred. Something that had been waiting 300 years for the galaxy to forget about the stubborn species that refused to accept defeat. Something that had spent those centuries learning, growing, and preparing for the moment when the word impossible would become irrelevant. In the cold depths of space, surrounded by the bones of their ancestors, humanity's final gift to the galaxy was opening its eyes for the first time. And it was very, very angry. The salvaged ship Carthek's Seeker drifted helplessly in the grip of forces beyond their understanding, while somewhere in the darkness, ancient protocols activated and dormant systems came online. The galaxy was about to rediscover why humans had been such a persistent problem during the Great Subjugation. They hadn't been fighting to win. They had been fighting to buy time. And now, after 3 centuries of patience, that time had finally come to an end. Admiral Kethvar received the emergency transmission while reviewing the quarterly production reports from the outer colonies. The message from Captain Zekmore made him read it 3 times before he accepted what he was seeing. A human vessel, active and operational, holding a hegemony salvage ship captive in what had been declared dead space for over a century. Impossible, he muttered, using the word that was becoming increasingly meaningless where humans were concerned. Assemble Task Force Theta. I want our 3 most advanced cruisers in that sector within 12 hours. His aide, a young Vorthak named Pel Thor, hesitated before speaking. Admiral, perhaps we should consult with the High Council before deploying military assets. The Proxima Accords that the human vessel mentioned. Our legal division has been researching them since the transmission arrived. Kethvar's mandibles clicked with irritation. What possible relevance could 300-year-old human treaties have to current hegemony authority? Sir, the Proxima Accords were never formally terminated. They established a framework for coexistence that technically remains in effect. More troubling, the Galactic Coexistence Treaty of 2301 that the vessel referenced actually supersedes hegemony territorial claims in several key areas. The Admiral stared at his aide with growing disbelief. You're telling me that legal documents signed by extinct civilizations somehow limit our sovereignty over conquered territory? Not extinct, sir. That's the problem. If even one human vessel remains operational and can demonstrate continuous governmental authority, then technically the Terran Federation still exists as a legal entity under galactic law. Kethvar rose from his chair, his powerful frame casting long shadows across the command chamber. Through 3 centuries of expansion, the hegemony had never encountered this particular complication. They had always ensured that conquered civilizations were completely extinguished, leaving no possibility for legal challenges to their authority. One ship cannot constitute a government, he said firmly. Deploy Task Force Theta immediately. We'll settle this through superior firepower, not ancient paperwork. But even as he gave the order, Kethvar felt a nagging uncertainty. Human warfare had always been unpredictable, marked by impossible victories and strategies that violated established military doctrine. If they had somehow survived for 3 centuries in secret, what else might they have accomplished? The 3 hegemony cruisers arrived at the debris field exactly 12 hours later, their sensors immediately detecting the massive energy signature emanating from the mysterious human vessel. Captain Yethran of the Hegemony's Pride found herself staring at tactical readings that challenged everything she thought she knew about space combat. The debris field has reorganized itself into a defensive formation, her tactical officer reported. Thousands of pieces of wreckage have formed interlocking patterns around the central vessel. It's like they've built a fortress out of their own destroyed ships. Through the main viewport, Yethran could see the impossible architecture that had emerged from what appeared to be random debris. Twisted metal had somehow reformed into elegant geometric shapes, creating barriers and weapon platforms that defied conventional understanding of engineering. The entire structure pulsed with energy patterns that seemed almost organic in their complexity. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. "This is Captain Yethran of the Vorthak Hegemony Warship Pride. You are holding our vessels illegally and interfering with legitimate salvage operations. Release our ships immediately or face military consequences." The response came not as a transmission, but as a voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds. Every member of the bridge crew heard it simultaneously, in their own native language, with perfect emotional nuance. "Captain Yethran, your arrival was anticipated. Task Force Theta's approach vector and tactical capabilities have been analyzed and cataloged. We note that your vessels represent the most advanced military technology currently deployed by the Hegemony. This information has been useful for updating our defensive protocols. Asterisk, how are you speaking directly into our minds?" Yethran demanded, fighting to keep the fear out of her voice. "Humans never developed telepathic communication technology. We did not. This communication method was adapted from the Kepler species' natural abilities, combined with Nexary quantum resonance principles and hegemony neural mapping techniques. 3 centuries of observation have provided extensive opportunities for technological integration." Asterisk, the implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. If the humans had been secretly observing and learning from every major galactic civilization for 3 centuries, their technological capabilities were completely unknown. They could have incorporated the best elements of dozens of different species' achievements into something entirely new. "Tactical analysis," Yethran ordered quietly. "What are we facing?" Her weapons officer studied his displays with growing confusion. "Captain, I can't get reliable readings on their defensive capabilities. The debris field is interfering with our sensors, but not in any way I recognize. It's as if the wreckage itself has become part of some kind of distributed shield system." The human voice spoke again, still carrying that unnerving quality of seeming to come from inside their own thoughts. "Your weapons systems are impressive, Captain. The quantum torpedo arrays represent a significant improvement over the designs used during the Great Subjugation. However, we have had considerable time to develop countermeasures. Would you like a demonstration of our current defensive capabilities?" Asterisk, negative, Yethran replied quickly. "We're here to secure the release of hegemony citizens, not to initiate hostilities." An interesting perspective. During the Great Subjugation, hegemony forces showed no such restraint when dealing with human civilians. Perhaps your species has evolved toward greater wisdom during the intervening centuries. Asterisk, the comment stung because it was accurate. The Great Subjugation had been brutal and thorough, designed to break human resistance through overwhelming force applied without distinction between military and civilian targets. It had been effective, but not something the hegemony discussed in their official histories. "That was a different time," Yethran said. "Current hegemony policy emphasizes peaceful coexistence with non-hostile civilizations." Indeed, which is why the Terran Federation is prepared to resume diplomatic relations under the framework established by the Proxima Accords. "We have prepared a comprehensive proposal for territorial boundaries, trade agreements, and mutual non-aggression protocols." Asterisk, the bridge fell silent. The humans weren't threatening war. They were offering to negotiate as equals. For a supposedly extinct civilization hiding in the wreckage of their own destroyed fleet, it was an almost insultingly confident position to take. You're in no position to negotiate anything, Yethran said. You have one ship and a handful of hostages. The hegemony controls thousands of systems and billions of citizens. The response came with what sounded distinctly like amusement. Captain, perhaps your sensors have not provided you with complete information about our current capabilities. Allow us to offer a more comprehensive picture. Asterisk the space around Task Force Theta suddenly filled with light as energy signatures began appearing throughout the surrounding debris field, not just in their immediate vicinity, but stretching out in all directions beyond the range of their sensors. The tactical display showed dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of energy sources activating in perfect coordination. What in the seven hells is happening? Yethran whispered. Her sensor operator was frantically adjusting his equipment, his voice rising with panic. Captain, the energy sources extend beyond our sensor range. The entire Terran exclusion zone appears to be one massive connected system. We're not facing one ship. We're facing something that spans multiple solar systems. The human voice continued with that same unsettling calm. For 300 years, the galaxy has assumed that the wreckage in the Terran exclusion zone represented the final remnants of human civilization. This was a useful misconception that allowed us to work undisturbed. What you see is not a graveyard, Captain. It is a construction project. Asterisk through the viewport, they could see the massive vessel at the center of the formation beginning to move. Not with the jerky, mechanical motion of conventional spacecraft, but with the fluid grace of something alive. As it moved, the debris around it flowed like liquid, reforming itself into new configurations with impossible speed and precision. How are you doing this? Yethran demanded. Matter doesn't behave this way without massive energy expenditure. Human engineering has always emphasized efficiency, Captain. When forced to rebuild our civilization from salvaged components, we learn to do more with less. The wreckage you see is held in quantum superposition, allowing it to exist in multiple configurations simultaneously until observation collapses it into the required form. Asterisk the explanation meant nothing to Yethran, but her science officer was staring at his instruments with the expression of someone witnessing miracles. Captain, he whispered, they're manipulating matter at the quantum level across distances that should be impossible. The energy requirements alone should be beyond anything achievable with known technology. Known technology, yes, asterisk the human voice agreed, apparently monitoring their conversations with ease. Asterisk, but you are operating under the assumption that we remained limited to known technology. 3 centuries is a very long time for a species that measures progress in decades rather than millennia. Asterisk Task Force Theta found itself surrounded by an architecture that defied every principle of space combat they had ever learned. The debris field had reformed itself into geometric patterns that seemed to extend in all directions, creating corridors and chambers that connected distant points in space through methods their sensors couldn't analyze. Admiral Kethvar needs to know about this immediately, Yethran said quietly. This isn't a first contact situation anymore. This is a potential threat to hegemony security on a scale we've never encountered. But even as she spoke, she realized that their communications were being monitored and probably controlled by the human intelligence surrounding them. Whatever message reached the Admiral would be exactly what the humans wanted him to know. The massive vessel completed its movement, settling into a new position that somehow made the entire debris field configuration more aesthetically pleasing. It was an oddly human touch. She realized the need to make even military installations somehow beautiful. Captain Yethran, your task force is welcome to remain as our guests while diplomatic protocols are established. We have prepared comfortable accommodations aboard our facility, and we believe you will find the experience educational. Asterisk educational how? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. You will have the opportunity to observe human engineering principles firsthand. We believe that mutual understanding is essential for productive interspecies relations. Asterisk the debris around them began to move again, forming what appeared to be docking structures specifically configured for hegemony vessels. The precision and speed of the transformation was breathtaking, suggesting computational capabilities that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. As her ship was guided toward one of the newly formed docking bays, Captain Yethran realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. They hadn't been defeated and driven to extinction. They had been playing a game with rules that no other species understood, and they had been winning for 300 years. The Great Subjugation hadn't ended human civilization. It had simply taught them to think on a much larger scale. The interior of the human facility defied everything Captain Yethran thought she knew about spacecraft design. Instead of the cramped corridors and purely functional spaces typical of military vessels, she found herself walking through chambers that seemed to stretch impossible distances, their walls covered in flowing patterns that shifted between artistic beauty and complex technical diagrams. How was this space larger inside than the vessel appeared from outside? Her science officer, Dex Mill, asked in wonder. Their human escort, who had introduced himself simply as Marcus, smiled with what seemed like genuine warmth. He appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes, but something about his presence suggested vast depths of experience. We've had 3 centuries to refine our understanding of spatial mechanics, Marcus explained as he led them through a corridor that definitely hadn't existed moments before. When you're working with salvage components and limited resources, you learn to make efficient use of available space. This goes beyond efficiency, Dex Mill protested. You're manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time. The energy requirements should be astronomical. Marcus paused beside what appeared to be a window looking out into space, though they were supposedly deep inside the vessel. Through the transparent surface, they could see the ongoing reconstruction of the debris field, pieces of ancient wreckage flowing like water into new configurations. Tell me, Dex Mill, Marcus said thoughtfully, what do you know about human history before the Great Subjugation? The Vortex scientist's mandibles clicked uncertainly. The standard historical records indicate that humans were a pre-spaceflight species that achieved basic interstellar travel shortly before making contact with galactic civilization. Your technological development was considered primitive by established standards. Primitive, Marcus repeated, his tone carrying subtle amusement. Yes, that was the general consensus. But consider this. Humans achieved spaceflight barely 2 centuries after discovering powered flight. From first radio transmission to quantum communication in less than a century. From mechanical computers to artificial intelligence in 50 years. Does that sound like a species that develops slowly? Captain Yethran found herself studying Marcus with new attention. His casual manner couldn't disguise the obvious intelligence behind his words, and there was something about his confidence that suggested he was speaking from personal experience rather than historical records. You talk as if you were there, she said carefully. Marcus turned from the window with that same warm smile. In a sense, I was, though the definition of has become rather fluid over the past few centuries. They entered what appeared to be an observation lounge, with comfortable seating arrangements that automatically adjusted to accommodate different species' physiologies. Through the transparent walls, they could see the ongoing transformation of the space around them, as if they were inside a living organism that was constantly reshaping itself. Please sit, Marcus said. I think it's time you understood what you've actually discovered here. As they settled into the provided seating, the walls around them began to display images, not projected, but somehow integrated into the transparent material itself. The first image showed Earth as it had been before the preservation of human civilization in a form that could survive the destruction of our physical infrastructure. The images shifted again, showing the frantic construction projects that had taken place during the final months of human resistance. We uploaded every human consciousness that was willing to be digitized, not as crude artificial intelligences, but as complete neural patterns preserved in quantum matrices. The implications hit them like a physical blow. If the humans had successfully digitized their entire population, then the extinction of humanity had been nothing more than a transition to a different form of existence. The fleet you destroyed, Marcus said, indicating the wreckage visible through the walls, was never intended to win a military victory. It was a mobile preservation facility designed to look like a conventional battle fleet while actually serving as a vast distributed computer system. Dexmill's scientific curiosity overcame his fear. "How many?" he whispered. "All of us," Marcus replied simply. "Every human who chose preservation rather than death. 7 billion consciousnesses, maintained in quantum suspension while we learned to exist in this new form. We had time, Captain. Centuries of subjective time to think, to learn, to plan, while the galaxy forgot about us." The viewing chamber filled with new images showing the gradual process of reconstruction that had taken place over the past 3 centuries. The apparently random debris field was revealed to be an incredibly sophisticated construction project, with each piece of wreckage serving as a component in a vast distributed intelligence. "You've been conscious this entire time?" Yethran asked. "Conscious, yes, but also changing. Human consciousness, when freed from biological constraints, develops in unexpected directions. We learn to think collectively when needed, individually when desired. We studied every scrap of information about galactic civilization that passed through this region. We observed the technologies of dozens of species and integrated the best elements into our own development. The images now showed human efforts to understand and replicate the achievements of other civilizations. Kepler biotechnology, Nexary quantum mechanics, Vort-Hack engineering principles, all being analyzed and improved upon by minds that had centuries to work without the constraints of physical limitations. "We became something new," Marcus explained. "Not quite human as we once were, not quite artificial intelligence as other species understand it. Something that could survive anything the galaxy could throw at us, because we had already survived the worst it had to offer." Captain Yethran felt a chill of understanding. "The territorial claims, the legal documents you referenced, you're not trying to reclaim your old civilization. You're announcing a new one." Marcus nodded with obvious approval. "Exactly. For 3 centuries, the galaxy has operated under the assumption that might makes right, that superior firepower grants the authority to determine the fate of other species. We're here to suggest a different approach." "What kind of approach?" Dexmill asked nervously. The viewing chamber transformed around them, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Hundreds of star systems were marked with different colors and symbols, showing the current territorial claims of various civilizations. "Cooperation instead of conquest," Marcus said. "The human experience has taught us that diversity of thought and approach leads to better solutions than uniformity imposed by force. We want to demonstrate that different species can work together as equals rather than in hierarchical relationships determined by military strength. The hegemony will never accept that," Yethran said. "Their entire civilization is built on the principle of superior species guiding inferior ones. Which is why we're prepared to offer a demonstration of alternative principles," Marcus replied calmly. "Your task force, for example, came here prepared for military action based on the assumption that humans were weak and vulnerable. Instead, you find yourselves as our honored guests, free to observe and learn without any threat to your safety." Through the walls, they could see more hegemony vessels arriving. Not the 3 ships of Task Force Theta, but an entire battle fleet. Admiral Kethvar had apparently decided that overwhelming force was the appropriate response to the human challenge. "Admiral Kethvar has brought significant firepower," Yethran observed. "How do you plan to deal with a full battle fleet without resorting to violence?" Marcus's smile took on a quality that was both reassuring and deeply unsettling. "The same way we've dealt with every challenge for the past 3 centuries. By being more creative than our opponents expect." The space around them began to fill with light as the human facility prepared to demonstrate exactly what 7 billion enhanced consciousnesses could accomplish when they worked together toward a common goal. The debris field was transforming again, but this time the scale was beyond anything they had witnessed before. "Captain," Marcus said softly, You're about to see why we believe cooperation is more powerful than conquest, and why we're confident that the word impossible is about to lose all meaning where humanity is concerned. Admiral Keth Var stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, staring at tactical displays that made no sense. His battle fleet of 37 vessels had arrived, expecting to face a single human ship and some scattered debris. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by what appeared to be the most sophisticated space-based construction project in galactic history. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "the debris field has reconfigured itself into defensive formations that span over 100,000 kilometers. Our weapon systems are having difficulty acquiring target locks due to some kind of interference pattern." "Interference from what?" Ketvar demanded. "Unknown, sir. It's as if space itself is singing. Our sensors are picking up harmonic frequencies that seem to be generated by the interaction between the various debris components." Through the main viewport, Kethvar could see the impossible architecture that had emerged from what intelligence reports had described as a random collection of destroyed ships. Elegant towers of reformed metal reached between disconnected hull sections, creating bridges and platforms that defied conventional understanding of structural engineering. The entire formation pulsed with soft light that seemed almost organic in its rhythm. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "I want to speak to whoever is in command of that facility." The response came immediately, but not through their communication systems. Instead, the voice of Marcus materialized in the center of the bridge as a fully interactive hologram, complete with the ability to make eye contact with each crew member individually. "Admiral Kethvar," Marcus said with polite formality, "welcome to the Terran Collective's primary research facility. I trust your journey was pleasant. You're holding our vessels and personnel illegally," Kethvar stated, fighting to maintain authority in the face of technology that shouldn't exist. "Release them immediately or face the consequences." Marcus appeared genuinely puzzled. "Holding them illegally? Admiral, your ships entered Terran space without permission and began conducting salvage operations on our property. Under galactic law, we would be justified in treating this as an act of piracy." "Terran space doesn't exist anymore," Kethvar replied firmly. "Humanity was defeated 3 centuries ago. This region was claimed by the hegemony through right of conquest." "Ah, I see the confusion," Marcus said with the patience of someone explaining simple concepts to a child. "You're operating under the assumption that conquest of territory grants permanent ownership. However, the legal framework established by the Galactic Coexistence Treaty specifies that territorial claims require ongoing administrative presence by the governing civilization." The Admiral's mandibles clicked with irritation. "We've maintained surveillance of this region for 3 centuries. Our authority is well established. Surveillance, yes. Administrative presence, no." Marcus gestured, and the holographic display filled with documented evidence. "Your ships have passed through this region, but never established permanent installations, conducted regular patrols, or provided governmental services to resident populations. Under interstellar law, that constitutes abandonment of territorial claims. There are no resident populations here," Kethvar protested. Marcus smiled with obvious amusement. "Admiral, you're speaking to approximately 7 billion Terran citizens currently residing within this facility. I hardly think we qualify as uninhabited space." The bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. If the humans had somehow maintained a continuous population in the region for 3 centuries, their legal claim to the territory was actually stronger than the hegemony's conquest-based authority. "Impossible," Kethvar muttered, using the word that seemed increasingly meaningless where humans were concerned. "I understand your skepticism," Marcus replied. "Perhaps a demonstration would be helpful. Computer, please provide Admiral Kethvar with a census of current Terran Collective citizens residing in this region." The air above the bridge's main display filled with data streams showing individual citizen records. Names, occupations, residential locations, all scrolling past at a rate too fast for biological minds to process, but clearly indicating an enormous population database. These could be fabricated records, Kethvar said, though his voice lacked conviction. They could be, Marcus agreed. But I suspect your legal department will want to verify them through independent galactic record-keeping systems. You'll find that every citizen listed has maintained continuous legal status under Terran Federation law, with all the rights and protections that entails. The Admiral realized he was dealing with opponents who had spent centuries preparing for this exact confrontation. Every legal challenge he could raise had apparently been anticipated and addressed through meticulous documentation and careful adherence to galactic law. Even if your territorial claims have legal merit, he said, you cannot seriously expect the hegemony to recognize the authority of uploaded consciousnesses. You're not really alive. The holographic Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting philosophical position, Admiral. Are you prepared to argue that digital consciousness lacks legal standing? Because approximately 40% of the Nexury Collective's population exists in cybernetic form, and the Kepler species transfers their consciousnesses between bodies as a normal part of their life cycle. Once again, the humans had turned a seemingly obvious argument into a complex legal and philosophical minefield. If the hegemony rejected the legitimacy of digital consciousness, they would be challenging the legal status of citizens from multiple allied civilizations. You're manipulating legal technicalities, Kethvar accused. We're following the established legal framework that the hegemony helped create, Marcus corrected. If you find these laws inconvenient, perhaps you should have considered their implications before using them to justify 3 centuries of territorial expansion. The tactical officer interrupted with urgent concern in his voice. Admiral, our weapons systems are experiencing systematic failures. It's as if something is rewriting our targeting software from a distance. Marcus's expression became more serious. Admiral, your ships are equipped with weapons designed to destroy planets and exterminate entire populations. In the interest of mutual safety, we've implemented temporary modifications to prevent accidental discharge. Your vessels remain fully operational for defensive and navigation purposes. You're sabotaging hegemony military equipment. We're implementing safety protocols for equipment that poses a threat to civilian populations, Marcus replied calmly. Once diplomatic relations are established and mutual non-aggression agreements are signed, we'll be happy to restore full weapons functionality. Kethvar stared at the holographic human with growing realization that he was completely outmatched, not just technologically, but strategically and legally. Every move the hegemony could make had been anticipated and countered by opponents who had spent centuries planning this confrontation. What do you want? He asked finally. Recognition of Terran territorial sovereignty over the regions specified in our diplomatic proposal. Establishment of formal diplomatic relations between the Terran Collective and the Vorthak hegemony. And, most importantly, acceptance of the principle that technological advancement does not grant the right to subjugate less developed civilizations. The Admiral studied the tactical displays showing his disabled battle fleet surrounded by architecture that defied physical laws. And if we refuse? Marcus's expression became genuinely sad. Then, we'll demonstrate why resistance is inadvisable. The space around the hegemony fleet began to change. What had appeared to be defensive formations was revealed as something far more complex. The debris field was reorganizing itself into geometric patterns that seemed to extend in all directions, creating a structure so vast that it disappeared beyond sensor range. What are you doing? Kethvar demanded. Showing you what we've built during our 3 centuries of apparent extinction, Marcus replied. Admiral, what you see as a debris field is actually the smallest component of a construction project that spans 17 star systems. We call it the network. The tactical displays updated to show the true scope of what they were facing. Energy signatures were appearing throughout the local galactic region, revealing installations hidden in asteroid fields, constructed within the cores of dead planets, built into the fabric of space itself. Each installation was connected to the others through quantum communication channels that operated faster than light. "This is impossible," Kethvar whispered. "There's that word again," Marcus said with gentle humor. "Admiral, your species has always thought of civilization as something that requires planets and physical infrastructure. We've learned to think bigger." The network was activating across multiple star systems, revealing the true scope of human survival and development. They hadn't just preserved their consciousness. They had spent 3 centuries building a distributed civilization that existed primarily in the spaces between worlds, using the galaxy's own infrastructure as their foundation. 7 billion minds working together for 300 years, Marcus explained. No need for sleep, no biological limitations, no death to interrupt long-term projects. We've had time to solve problems that other civilizations consider impossible. Through the viewport, Admiral Kethvar could see portions of the network beginning to demonstrate capabilities that challenged every principle of known physics. Matter was being assembled from quantum foam, space itself was being folded to connect distant locations, and energy was being channeled through dimensions that shouldn't exist. "This is what cooperation accomplishes," Marcus said softly. "Imagine what we could achieve working together instead of in opposition." The hegemony battle fleet found itself completely helpless within a structure that spanned light years and operated according to principles that their scientists couldn't begin to understand. But rather than being destroyed or captured, they were being invited to witness the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. "We don't want to conquer the galaxy," Marcus continued. "We want to show it a better way to exist. A way based on mutual cooperation rather than hierarchical dominance. A way that honors the unique contributions of every species instead of demanding conformity to a single model." Admiral Kethvar realized that humanity had done something no other civilization had ever accomplished. They had turned their own extinction into the foundation for a form of existence that transcended every limitation that had previously defined intelligent life. "The demonstration is complete, Admiral," Marcus said. "Your fleet is free to return to hegemony space with our diplomatic proposal. We hope you'll consider it carefully." As the network powered down to standby mode, the Admiral found himself facing a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Accept humanity's challenge to the existing order, or continue trying to maintain control through increasingly obsolete concepts of military dominance. 6 months after the encounter at the Terran Exclusion Zone, High Counselor Veltar stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, holding a data crystal that contained humanity's formal proposal for restructuring interstellar relations. They represent an existential threat that must be eliminated before they grow stronger. High Counselor Veltar had reviewed the reports from Admiral Kethvar's encounter with disturbing fascination. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made conventional military response not just inadvisable, but potentially suicidal. Yet their approach had been consistently diplomatic, emphasizing legal precedent and cooperative solutions. "The question before us," Veltar continued, "is whether we accept their invitation to participate in what they call the cooperative framework, or maintain our current system of hierarchical authority based on technological and military superiority." The Kepler representative, a graceful being with flowing tentacles, spoke with harmonic overtones that conveyed complex emotional nuance. "The humans have shown remarkable restraint for beings with such overwhelming advantages. Their refusal to use force against Admiral Kethvar's fleet suggests genuine commitment to peaceful coexistence." Clever manipulation, War Leader Krexthon countered. "They allow our forces to return unharmed, so we'll underestimate their willingness to use violence. It's a psychological warfare tactic designed to make us lower our defenses." The debate continued for hours, but Veltar noticed that the arguments against cooperation were becoming increasingly desperate. Every practical analysis of the human capabilities led to the same conclusion. Military confrontation would be catastrophic for existing galactic civilizations. The humans had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, and they held every possible advantage. As the council session entered its second day, A new voice joined the discussion. The chamber's communication systems activated without any external signal, and the familiar figure of Marcus appeared as a hologram in the center of the assembly. Honored representatives, Marcus said with respectful formality, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but we felt it was important to address some misconceptions that have emerged during your deliberations. War leader Crexthon rose from his seat with obvious aggression. This is a closed session of the Galactic Council. You have no authority to participate in our discussions. Marcus smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Under the original charter of the Galactic Council, any civilization that demonstrates continuous sovereignty over established territory has the right to request observer status. We're simply exercising that right. High Counselor Veltar consulted his legal advisors through rapid digital communication. After several minutes, he nodded reluctantly. The human representative may address the council as a petitioner for observer status. Thank you, Marcus replied. I want to address the concerns that have been raised about human intentions and capabilities. War leader Crexthon, you've expressed worry that we represent a threat to galactic stability. I'd like to offer a different perspective. The holographic display filled with images showing the current state of galactic civilization. Territory maps covered in conflicting claims, resource distribution charts showing massive inequality between species, military expenditure statistics that reveal the enormous cost of maintaining the existing hierarchical system. For centuries, galactic civilization has operated on the principle that stronger civilizations have the right to dominate weaker ones. Marcus continued. This has led to an endless cycle of expansion, conquest, and resistance that wastes enormous resources and causes immeasurable suffering. The images shifted to show alternative models based on cooperative resource sharing and mutual technological exchange. The projections indicated dramatically improved living standards for all participating species, along with accelerated technological advancement through collaborative research. The Terran Collective has developed capabilities that could easily continue this pattern of domination on an unprecedented scale, Marcus admitted. We could conquer the galaxy and impose human authority over every inhabited system. But we've learned that conquest creates more problems than it solves. Prism of Infinite Thought pulsed with colors indicating curiosity. What have you learned that suggests cooperation is more effective than dominance? Marcus's expression became more serious. That diversity of thought and approach leads to better solutions than uniformity imposed by force. The challenges facing galactic civilization, resource depletion, technological stagnation, increasing social instability, require creative solutions that can only emerge from genuine cooperation between different perspectives. Pretty words, War Leader Crexthon said dismissively, but cooperation requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. Why should we make ourselves vulnerable to beings with your capabilities? Because we've already made ourselves vulnerable to you, Marcus replied quietly. By revealing our existence and capabilities, we've given up the advantages of surprise and secrecy that allowed us to develop undisturbed for 3 centuries. We've chosen transparency over strategic advantage because we believe cooperation is more valuable than dominance. The chamber fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. The humans could have remained hidden indefinitely, continuing to observe and learn while other civilizations remained unaware of their existence. By revealing themselves and their capabilities, they had indeed sacrificed significant strategic advantages for the possibility of diplomatic cooperation. High Counselor Veltar studied the human representative with new understanding. You're offering to share your technological advantages in exchange for structural changes to galactic civilization. We're offering to work together toward solutions that benefit everyone rather than maintaining a system that benefits only the strongest, Marcus corrected. The technological sharing is simply one component of a larger cooperative framework. The debate continued for several more days, but the momentum had shifted. Representatives began discussing implementation details rather than whether to accept the human proposal. The practical advantages of cooperation were too obvious to ignore, and The consequences of continued conflict were too dangerous to risk. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Cooperation Accords were signed by representatives of 47 different civilizations. The document established new principles for interstellar relations based on mutual benefit rather than hierarchical dominance, with enforcement mechanisms that relied on economic and social pressure rather than military force. The signing ceremony took place aboard the human facility. The spatial manipulation, the quantum engineering, the coordination across multiple star systems simultaneously. Marcus smiled with the expression of someone sharing a treasured secret. We think differently now. 7 billion minds learning to work together for 3 centuries teaches you that the word impossible is just another way of saying we haven't figured out yet. Through the viewing chamber, they could see construction projects beginning throughout the local stellar region. Not human projects, but collaborative efforts involving multiple species working together toward common goals. The cooperative framework was already producing results that exceeded the capabilities of any single civilization. Do you think it will last? Admiral Yethran asked. This new approach to galactic civilization. Marcus considered the question carefully. Nothing lasts forever, but we've built something that adapts and grows rather than simply expanding through conquest. That gives it a better chance of surviving the challenges ahead. As they watched, new vessels arrived at the facility. Not military ships, but exploration vessels, research platforms, and diplomatic transport from dozens of different species. The galaxy was learning to cooperate, and the results were already exceeding everyone's expectations. The human dreadnought that had awakened in the depths of space had indeed changed everything, not through conquest or destruction, but by demonstrating that there was a better way for intelligent species to coexist among the stars. In the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't learning to survive their own extinction. It was learning to help the galaxy survive the obsolete concepts that had dominated interstellar relations for millennia. The impossible had become routine, just as it always did when humans decided that something was worth accomplishing. And for the first time in galactic history, the word impossible was being retired from diplomatic vocabulary, replaced by the far more interesting question: how shall we do this together?